Just because I like somebody of the same sex or I identify as who I truly am doesn't mean that I should be a threat to your life.
I didn't ask to be here. I didn't ask to be born. Let me live.
Right. Hi everyone, it's V. Welcome back to another episode of Don't Ask V That, the space where I get to talk about all taboo topics affecting trans women of color and queer youth today. As always, I want to give a big thank you to all my dollies listening. In a world where trans people are ignored, attacked, and overlooked, you open the door for important conversations that make us heard. If you enjoy listening, make sure to tell everybody to stream Don't Ask V That on all streaming platforms and leave a like and review so we can continue to have this safe space for queer people of color like myself. But for today's episode, we are going to be talking about all things online bullying, and I'm gonna bring in the one, the only Clawdeena.
Holla, holla. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I just want you to introduce yourself. Tell me a little bit about what you do.
So,
what's the gig?
I'm Clawdeena. I'm known for my own cyberbullying, the #1 cyberbully in all digital.
I don't think you're known for just that.
Not just that, but just mostly. No, I'm known for my doll content. I started when I was 10 doing stop motions, and then it became becoming a doll by dressing like them.
Period. So you've been doing it for a long time.
She's a veteran.
Right.
She's old.
What got you started?
When I was 3 years old, I actually watched all of your podcasts. So I saw that your mom was saying that you used to run around the house in a towel.
Right.
So when I was a kid, I used to run around my house in a blanket, like a little red blanket, and I would play with my Ariel doll. So I feel like that's really how I got.
That's so sweet.
When I started with dolls, I was like, yeah, I really connect with that vibe.
And what got you started with your whole YouTube journey? Obviously, you do a lot of content with and about doll collecting and stuff like that.
Yes.
So what got you into posting about it?
A lot of people will be like, oh, I just really love whatever they're passionate about. So I feel like,
right.
You talk a lot about trans advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted validation and attention. I wanted approval. I was a really lonely kid, to be honest. So I felt like having an online platform where I could create a voice for myself when I didn't really have a voice in the real world is what I was looking for.
Right.
So I just always tell people I just wanted validation.
Yeah.
I wanted the likes and the views. I'm
exactly.
not even gonna front. Why would I lie about that?
I know. I think often doll collecting is looked at as such a niche thing, which I think it is at times, but I feel like everybody enjoys it in one way or another, whether they enjoy collecting action figures or different cars. I feel like everybody to an extent likes to collect
Call
something.
it what it is. It's a doll.
Yeah.
Your Funko's a doll. Your action figure's a doll. But seriously, I do feel like it's interesting because dolls are kind of on the rise.
Yeah.
And it's almost further proof that, who doesn't love a good doll?
For sure. I think there's a big nostalgia trip right now too.
Absolutely.
Where especially with the Barbie movie coming out. Are you excited for that? I see you're
so excited.
Literally dressed as Margot Robbie herself.
I am so excited. So I don't know if this is a neurodivergent trait or what, but I have to, I got to dress up whenever there's a new doll line.
Literally every single time there's a different doll coming out or a new occasion for something.
Pick a personality.
You literally get the outfit to the T. Everyone's gagged always.
Well, this is by Eddie's Design. So he's known for creating. He created for you.
Yes.
He created for you as well. So he creates for Sugar and Spice. And, he made this quick.
Right.
Minutes. It took an hour or something.
Now that I recognize it, I kind of recall watching a design video that he made.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, he also designed this because I'm auditioning for Oklahoma.
Oh, really? Is that right? Are you going to be Cassie?
I am Cassie.
Okay. Whose man is you cheating with?
Every single one. Ken, Alan.
Bye. I'm somebody who collects dolls as well, and that's actually something we've bonded over for sure.
That's literally how we met.
No, literally. I was gonna ask if you can recall the first time we met.
Of course.
Yeah, it's just getting the ball rolling. But
yes, of course I remember. So you should tell them.
Exactly. Okay, for me, I was such a big fan of Clawdeena before I even met them. I was watching their YouTube videos, and in the midst of me getting back into my doll collecting, because I had collected them when I was a kid, but not as an adult, I would see these ranking videos of different Bratz facts. It would be 15 Bratz facts that you didn't know, and I would be obsessed. But I was wait, I want a doll of my own. So I decided to start collecting again, and that's when I saw Clawdeena, and I was oh my gosh, this is something you can do in the later stages of your life. So
yeah, absolutely. So then we were DMing a little bit, and you were visiting LA.
Right.
And we had a doll hunt. We literally met I think you came to my apartment, then we went to Target.
Yeah, that was
so fun.
Yeah, we did that whole like doll rivalry thing where I was like, at the time, I only collected Bratz. I think you were a big Monster High stan.
Well, see, Monster High wasn't even, I don't think it was back out yet, but all I can think about is come on, me emo boy.
No, literally.
I just can't.
We were trying to like record pussy stunts outside of the Target, and like there was literally like grandpas and moms like looking at us while we were playing Aisha Erotica.
It just came back to me that we took all those paparazzi shots in the Target cart.
Yes. Oh my gosh. We were being so extra, but like it was a beautiful time for me because I was in high school at the time. I didn't have like that
so
great of friends, you know.
Oh, we're definitely gonna have to get into that.
And I don't know, I just like didn't have a space where I could fully feel like I could be like myself. And that was one of the first times, especially like I would always come out to LA just so I could be myself and like meet the people that actually care about me.
When you would come out though, like I would never think that. You're so confident. I always say this, like you are the most confident person I know. And you really seem to have known yourself when I met you. So I would have never thought like that's how you felt.
I'd say like, even though I've had confidence, it's easy to hide kind of like what you're sad about. But honestly, like my social media has given me kind of like a reclaim of my power, if that makes sense. Like not only was I bullied in school, but also online. And so I kind of had to learn in a sense how to take the hate and use it to my benefit and kind of use it as like a motivation for me to continue to propel myself for the future. But I think like as queer people, everybody has to do that or you will never get through anything like discrimination. You're literally discriminated every day for just existing.
For real, especially now. Especially now. Well, maybe not especially now. Our predecessors would be like, well, you know, we went through some things that you know, perhaps we are more privileged to not have to experience.
Exactly.
But
I think that we still experience discrimination. It's definitely like on a way lesser level because generations before us, people have, in a sense, like paved the way for us and literally just being themselves and representing themselves. But we're doing it on a level where it's like we are outwardly like using what the world hates us for as our brands, as our kind of entity.
Yeah, it's like reclaiming. So I'm supposed to be doing a pride campaign with Monster High, and what I identified as pride is taking back your narrative when the world tries to tell your story for you.
Right.
Because I feel like that there's a lot of that going on, like people trying to make claims of like what being queer is. And that's what I heard my whole life growing up was like gay people are predators, gay people are like dangerous, queer people are dangerous. And I feel like pride is about reclaiming that narrative and being like, you know, I'm just literally out here vibing, like existing.
Just because I like somebody of the same sex or I identify as who I truly am doesn't mean that, you know, I should be a threat to your life.
Right. I didn't ask to be here.
Honestly, I think that's
I didn't ask to be born. Let me live.
Right. That'll get us into today's topic for sure, is online bullying. Why is the topic online bullying important to you?
Mostly because it's my favorite pastime.
Really? I'm like, for me, sometimes it does give me like sort of like a let me reclaim my power.
Okay. In all seriousness, like, I do think like, first of all, nobody hates me more than I hate myself. So go on and say what you want to say.
Bye.
But I do think that I'm very passionate about this topic because like you were expressing, like I was bullied a lot growing up. I was always... And I don't know if you've ever taken the RADS test, but I need to see a psychiatrist ASAP because I scored very high. It's basically like, it's a test for neurodivergence and like your neurodivergent traits. And I feel like growing up, I just didn't really pick up on social cues. So I was really bullied for that.
Right.
But then also being so queer and expressive online, I do think that I am a bit of an expert on online harassment from both sides. You know, I'm not even going to front. I feel like growing up, as a way to protect and defend myself, I'm sure there's plenty of people I bullied online and didn't even realize. So, you know, I like to think I'm a master at this topic.
No, for me, it's like, I don't know. A lot of people are familiar, at least if they know me or anything about my social media presence, is that people just constantly come for me for just nitpicking of anything that I talk about. And it typically is because I'm talking about hard topics that are taboo for the trans community. So it's kind of like uncharted territory.
You see The Little Mermaid?
Yes.
Uncharted waters.
Bye. Uncharted waters. But, you know, in that sense, people give me more hate and backlash because they don't like what they're not familiar with.
No, of course. And, you know, I don't know what she identifies as, like maybe an author, like a podcaster herself, but her name is Africa Brooke. And she talks about how if you are to put yourself out there, you're going to get criticism.
Right.
And you kind of have to choose between performing or being authentic to yourself and like having a voice. And to forfeit that voice is, you know, a very lonely life. So I feel like there's a lot to be said about you.
Yeah. I
willing.
was even asking questions leading up for this podcast, and somebody was like, you have to make sure that you're prepared to get hate. And I'm just like, I feel like that's true, but at the same time, like, is it warranted?
There's a lot to unpack there because in some ways I do feel like that's like gaslighting. It's almost like victim shaming because, oh, you chose to put yourself out there, so you should just expect to get hate. Like, being realistic, yes, obviously you're going to receive hate, but does that mean you're deserving of hate? Absolutely not. Like, no abuse is ever warranted. I think we need to stop this normalization of like, well, you put yourself out there, or like, well, you know, you chose this. That's literally verbiage that we use to victim shame people.
You kind of went over this briefly, but how did your social media start? I believe you started with your cousin, correct?
Technically, I started in 2007 on YouTube with Pokemon cards. Yeah. So nobody really knows this, but I had like another channel. It wasn't like successful or anything, but I saw people doing Pokemon card unboxings and I really wanted views. I don't think consciously that's like what I was aware of, but I saw these other people doing Pokemon card unboxings and getting so many views, and I wanted to be popular and liked.
Yeah. Oh.
That's really, I just wanted to be liked. I was so lonely.
Yeah.
It's sad, but like, you know, it is what it is.
Were you a lonely person in sort of like your schools, you would say?
Yeah, honestly,
and were you like seeking for
just
attention and validation from those that weren't at school?
I think there's a couple things. So if you haven't seen, my mom has a deformity. Half of her face is covered in a birthmark and it swells. So whenever we would go out in public, like, we knew people were making fun of us, and maybe not me per se, but when someone's making fun of your mom, like, they're making fun of you.
Yeah.
Because, you know, she's a part of me. So everywhere I was going, like, there was so much anxiety and tension around everyone's looking at us. Everybody's making fun of us. Like, we couldn't walk into the local Walmart without people having something to say or see.
Yeah.
So then going into school, I had so much anxiety about that, because I was just so used to being so hyper vigilant and like putting me in a fight or flight mode at all times.
Yeah.
But again, like, I had like neurodivergent traits where I just didn't know why people didn't like me. For such a long time, I was always like, what's wrong with me? Like, I wish someone would just give me a rule book on how to make friends or like how to fit in, because if somebody told me what to do, I would have just done it.
Right.
But I didn't know. So then I turned to the internet, where I saw people were becoming popular for just opening cards. It was like, you know, people have to like me then. And at that point, like, you don't realize, especially at 7 years old, that social media is kind of a numbers game. You have to understand analytics. You have to understand like metadata and how the algorithm processes like the quality of your content.
Yeah.
But all I was seeing was numbers, and I was like, I want views. Like, I want to be popular. I want people to like me so desperately. And yeah.
So did you kind of like care what the attention was, negative or not?
I didn't want negative attention. Like, I was very, very sensitive. And I guess I didn't even, again, I was 7 years old. So like, you're not really thinking about that. But I would get very offended. I mean, to this day, I get so offended by comments. I'm a very sensitive person.
Me as well.
So
yeah, I can't even like look at comments without just not wanting to look at them. Like, I will genuinely not look at comments, and it makes me sad because there's so many people who appreciate me and are trying to show me love, but I'm just like, for my mental health, I can't look at it all day. And I don't think it's healthy for you to even look at positive comments about yourself, because
sometimes, you know, you can't take the good without the bad. And I do think that, again, this is another thing I think people shame people for, which is like, well, you're just focusing on the negative comment. Don't just focus on the negative comment.
Yeah.
Bitch, if anybody could just do that, like, we just wouldn't do it. But the human brain is literally wired to focus on those types of things, because from my understanding, I don't want to spread pseudoscience, but we're naturally trained to be problem solvers. So when we see like this type of conflict, it feels threatening, and you want to you want to figure out how to fix that quick.
It's hard to be classy. Like, I don't know. I've always been somebody that's like an activist at heart. Like, my trans activism was before online. So like, I was really just doing kind of normal little comedy videos at first. But like you,
the Musically,
yes, you know.
I don't even know the dances.
Yeah, I mean, like you, I had like an unsuccessful YouTube channel as well. Like,
secret
you know,
channel.
it got me in a way to like start what I know today on how to like content create and like edit videos and stuff. So I'm thankful for that. I kind of experienced like online bullying from my peers at school because they're just cowardly and didn't want to say anything in person.
I mean, I watched the episode with your mom and I was like, wow, I didn't even know how much you went through.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot.
Well, I also like, I try to just like focus on the positive, which sometimes I feel like can be like an inaccurate depiction of kind of
She's being a little delulu.
Yeah. Well, it's like not accurate with what the trans community goes through. Like most of it is negative. And I do try to kind of like polish it with sunshines and rainbows and make it like more enjoyable that it is. But that's really just like, I guess like my subconscious trying to convince me that I'm okay.
I am curious like how you navigate that, because I struggle a lot with that myself. Like
Really?
do you rationalize, like have defense mechanisms up and like pretend everything's okay? Or do you address things and like do you think about it a lot? Because I think any type of imbalance isn't healthy. But then honestly, because I'm doing this video on Barbie, she pretends everything's fine all the time.
Right.
And she's still surviving and thriving, but
Yeah.
we're not a brand, like we're people. So
Yeah.
how do you navigate that as a person?
And it's really hard because I am becoming a brand and I am, you know, in a sense, like marketing my vulnerability. When I'm doing ads, like they're asking me to talk about like things in my daily lives. And I'm just like,
it gets draining.
it dehumanizes you. And then people dissecting your every move on social media is also like just adds on to it.
You know, I think the issue is that we've kind of created this performative intimacy in a way where I don't, you know, anytime we say things, it's not necessarily like disingenuine, but it is performative intimacy. Like we're letting people in a little bit. But the reality is like, this is only one facet and part of us. Like us speaking on this podcast could be very different than us going to get sushi or like us in distress or whatever. But so when you're doing that type of performative intimacy, like there are still very vulnerable aspects, but you become so objectified.
Exactly.
Like we are objectifying very real, very vulnerable stories. And I think not like, you know, I don't want to be one of those people that's like being an influencer is so hard. But I do think that anybody in a creative space where you're putting yourself out there, whether it's a political activist, whether it's an influencer, actor, entertainer, whatever, you are objectified and like put under a bit of a microscope. And then we're treated like consumables because there's so many of us now that it's kind of like, you know, you just scroll. And I almost see like, with all due respect, like I see a lot of social media as the fast food of the internet. Like it's very easy to consume, but it's not necessarily sustainable for our own well-being.
Right.
And then we're treating people like we can just throw them away, like on to the next person, on to the next entertainer.
Yes. Can you recall like a first time that you ever got like a hate comment?
I can't remember the first time I got like a hate comment on YouTube, but I remember just being part of the doll community on a Facebook group. I ended up getting on a Skype call with some other Bratz collectors, and they just ripped me to shreds. I was only 12. I think they were like 15. So they were a little older. They knew a little better than I did.
Yeah.
And like my comebacks were like really bad. I think one of my comebacks was like, you look like a Jonas brother.
Oh my
gosh. You know, but their comebacks were really harsh and like they really stung. And I was only like 11 or 12 again. So that, I mean, to this day, like that sticks with me. And I think that what it became in my mind was like, I was on this pursuit of power. Like now it's even more important for me to have a platform because I need to prove these people wrong. I need to prove that like I'm not stupid or like I don't deserve to be alone. Like, so I think that that's kind of what it turned into for me. But that's my, probably not the first time, but my earliest memory of like, oh, this was bad. Like online bullying is real.
There's such like a weird kind of level to different ages being online as well. Like I don't think it's very safe for you to be online as a young person because you have to already fully be matured. I was very mature for my age just because I was experiencing bullying in person. So it kind of forced me to like understand that people bully because they have their own battles and they're trying to feel better about themselves. But not every young person can understand that. Did you have like a hard time understanding that growing up, or did you, in a sense, kind of like quickly adapt to it?
I think because of, again, like constantly being ridiculed because of my mom, I understood that people did it from typically like not even a malicious place, like their own form of validation. But I really struggled with like, why me? Why is my whole life centered around like bullying? And it's really hard for me to break from a victim mentality because it does constantly feel like, you know, I don't want to be like awkward or annoying. I just don't always know how to respond. Like my brain just doesn't always.
And that's okay. I don't think we need to all just be these little social machines. Like, exactly. I feel like it's okay to just enjoy each other's presence and, you know, not critique each other so much.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. And I think social media definitely heightens this pressure of like perfection outside of just image, but even personality. Like it's really hard to even watch some podcasts sometimes and be like, I wish I could be that funny. Yeah. Or like witty.
No, literally. That's how I've been feeling recently. I'm just like, at this point though, I need to just be myself. And I feel like with that comes like critique and stuff. And, you know, I'm like, the way I said this, maybe it could have been better and maybe people could have received it in a different light. But like, it isn't. This is like we're here now. And I feel like the end to my downfall of like critiquing myself.
Okay. We love to hear that. We love to hear it.
Yeah.
Did you see Jenna Ortega's Actors on Actors with Elle Fanning? Mm-mm. So she broke down in tears. Basically, from my understanding, she was talking kind of about like mob mentality and how like now that she has a platform, how distressing it is for her to try to be perfect all the time.
Right.
And like to always say the right thing. And like that she was saying how there's causes that are really important to her, from my recollection, because I don't want to be called out myself if I'm misquoting. But from my understanding, she said that there were like causes that she was passionate about, but that she didn't really speak about them because she was afraid of getting called out for saying something wrong or like misunderstanding. And I think that there's a really big microscope, not just on creators. I think this is a big misconception too. It's not just influencers or actors, like a big microscope on like, you better have all the facts and you better be absolutely perfect on the internet because people will come for you. They will correct you quickly. And sometimes, you know, I think one of the struggles that I have is like, I think there's a big difference between being ignorant and being intolerable. Like somebody who is ignorant sometimes wants to learn. Like they're asking questions because they're curious and like they're willing to make mistakes versus somebody who's not tolerant, who is like blatantly bigoted. And we get a lot of comments like that. Like I have plenty of bigoted comments and like men all up in my comments telling me how, you know, I'm going to burn in hell and I'm an abomination, that I'm so sexy.
That part, you know, the last one.
When there's people who are ignorant, who want to be educated, there's so much anxiety around like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
That now it's harder to have these conversations sometimes because people are just trying to avoid it altogether. Like I want to see what Jenna Ortega has to say. Like, what are your thoughts? Let's live, laugh, learn together.
No, because I've seen a lot of old videos of her pop up where she's just talking about like, she'll go on live streams and people will be like, you look so gay. And she's
I know,
like,
I was thinking about that too. Gay means happy.
Yeah, she just like reads them for filth. But I'm like, oh my gosh, you're such a young person who is like expressing their feelings. Yes. And I could see how maybe she didn't feel like there was like a big microscope at the time for her, but you know.
And I'm sure being on Disney Channel, like she was media trained, and I'm sure there was a lot of stress going on there. You know, a reoccurring thing, even again, watching your podcast, because I literally sat and watched all of them.
Oh, thank you.
Of course. No, they're good. They're good. And your guests, I was like, wow, they're so well spoken.
No,
I really thought I had it in the bag. I was like,
you did.
Like it's a competition. Right. Like I'm trying to win or something. But where is my prize?
Bye. No, because literally a little insider tea. Clawdeena was supposed to be the first episode, but I was just so unprepared, and it was my first time doing a podcast ever.
It was the first pancake, you know?
Yeah, but the episode was pretty good, and I will say that you like are such a, what's the word? Like,
manipulative person. No, I'm kidding.
I'm over you. I'm here trying to give you a compliment and you're like,
I love shutting it down.
Be self-deprecating.
Like, hate.
Shut it down. No, you're just very well spoken.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So how do you think you responded to hate comments then versus now?
Well, okay. So then I grew up with 5 older siblings and we grew up in an apartment together. We had to share bedrooms.
Right.
Needless to say, there was a lot of drama all the time. So we were always getting to fights.
Yeah.
and we went for the jugular. When we had something to say, it was rough. So I didn't realize going into the internet that not everybody grew up that way. So when people were hating on me, I thought at that time, like the appropriate response is like, go in, like go in on how they look, go in on their grammar. Like they are never going to want to live again. But then I kind of learned that one, especially when you're creating a platform, you simply cannot behave that way. Like that's just not professional. But I also, it never was fulfilling. Like first of all, especially when there's an anonymous comment, you don't know how they're receiving that. And I think that it left me feeling really stuck in this constant state of, again, hypervigilance, of waiting for them to respond, obsessively refreshing, waiting for them to respond so I could go back in on them.
Right.
And I was emotionally dysregulated. I think a lot of what's going on in the internet right now is a lot of emotional dysregulation. There is a lovely, lovely Breathe With Me Barbie available at Target that I think everyone should purchase. Learn to meditate. But that's something that I've had to do.
You said
is like
emotional regulation?
Yeah. It was like emotional regulation.
Go into detail with that, because
So being emotionally regulated has a lot to do with your nervous system, which is kind of like your body's response. So being aware of your body and like, are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling angry? And how does that affect your body? Because I think when I was responding to those comments, I would shake. Like I would literally shake, and I would be so like, I couldn't focus on anything else. If my mom would knock on the door and be like, it's dinner time, I would be like, go away. Like I'm so focused on this hate comment because I was emotionally dysregulated.
Yeah.
But when you learn to emotionally regulate through like healthy coping skills, regardless of what that might be, those comments don't feel so overbearing. Like you don't have to focus on somebody's opinion of you, because I feel like where my mentality was like, oh, they mess with the wrong one. Like they cannot get one over on me. Like I have to get back at them.
Yeah.
But becoming emotionally regulated means when you see things that are offensive or like hurtful to you, even if it's like, again, if it's political, if it's a doll you don't like whatever it might be, being emotionally regulated means that you're not impulsive. Like you don't jump to responding. You take a minute, you breathe, you might like write down what you want to say first, and then figure out what's a mature, appropriate way to respond.
Right. What was the process for you kind of unlearning that instant reaction?
Lots and lots of therapy.
Yeah.
I did a lot of different types of therapy. I did group therapy. I've done EMDR, CBT, DBT, like all the basic stuff. And I just learned different ways of communicating and responding. And I've learned that people respond best to empathy. So when there's been a couple times where I started responding to hate comments and I practiced active listening to them. So what are they really saying? Like if they're trying to check me, like as opposed to being emotionally dysregulated and being like, this offends me and that's not what I meant. Like they have to see me for what I intended. What about what they're saying? Like how about I take a minute to listen to what they're saying and respond in a way that's empathetic? And normally I'll say something like, it sounds like based on your comment, like if somebody's like, your makeup looks busted, I might say something like, you know, it sounds like you're a person who is looking out for others. Like you want to make sure that they're presenting their best. And of course, like it can be welcome to like hear criticism, but this was a time where like I was not asking for criticism, and I would have preferred it if you would have just not commented at all. And a lot of times people actually respond and they're like, you know, I didn't even think about that. I'm really sorry. Like I'm not trying to hate on you or anything. And a lot of people don't realize that their comments are hateful.
Exactly.
Sometimes they don't even realize.
I think there's definitely like right now more than ever, there's a lot of relationships online that people think they have with the creator. Parasocial relationships. And I feel like these parasocial relationships kind of put you in a state where you have to like be understanding to what the person is saying for sure. Well, like you were saying, kind of like when you want to talk about something, especially with like activism, you want to always be correct and have everything.
Yeah, you know, you don't want to be spreading misinformation.
Everything prepared, you know? And I feel like when people critique me on my activism or say maybe the way you're expressing your feelings can be harmful to certain communities, it is difficult to kind of like take a seat back and be like, okay, maybe I should reevaluate how I'm speaking or...
Well, and I think to touch on that in regards to like our nervous system, I recently went to, it wasn't a group therapy, it wasn't like a retreat, but it was like some type of group setting. And somebody was saying how they got like a comment, I don't remember what specifically it was, but they were critiquing something that she said that was political.
Yeah.
And she said that she got really flustered. And then the group leader was like, well, it sounds like you were literally being threatened. Like because what happens sometimes when you're getting those comments, like you feel so overwhelmed because you're so afraid of like, I don't want people to hate me. I don't want to receive a ton of hate. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to lose my career. Right. I don't want to lose my future. So it feels very threatening sometimes because it can be like, if something gets misinterpreted, it can, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 seconds to ruin it. Yeah,
I definitely agree. I used to respond in the worst ways possible. And I think it's just something within the queer community where you feel like you need to defend yourself over everything. Like, I don't know. I just feel like, especially because people pick on you and bully you so much, you decide to pick up on those things that people say to you, repeat it to them. And sometimes, like, you don't realize how harsh and hurtful the thing somebody said to you was until you say it to somebody else.
And you know what's wild is I always thought that like when I was attacking people back that they weren't getting hurt by it.
Right.
Like I guess in my mind, like I just assumed that if they were really hurt by it, like they would start crying or whatever. Yeah. But when people did it, I didn't think I was really hurting them.
But at the same time, like we're not here to be your punching bag.
Yes. So it's really difficult. I remember being in school and like, I guess this isn't quite online bullying, but I went to a school in a very small town and I was in 7th grade at this time and I was the only gay person that was out at the school. And I remember there was like a group of teenage boys and they would always make fun of me every day. And I would go off on them and I'd be like, that's why your teeth are so yellow and blah, 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 blah. But they would just all laugh. And it was almost like I was like their little puppet to like perform. Yeah. Like it was like I was like an object. And it was so frustrating and it felt so powerless for me to not know how I could retaliate to hurt them to a point where they would stop. Like I had to punish them.
Right.
And now that I'm older, I look back and I'm like, well, one, like, that's just not my responsibility. That's so much energy on me to try to do. But when you're, again, like when you go through trauma or emotional dysregulation, you just want to control that. Like you want people to stop beating you up all the time.
You. Yeah, I think it's definitely relevant to online bullying. Do you think the way that you handled your in-person bullying kind of prepared you for your online bullying and how to be a public figure?
I think what it prepared me for, or like what it set me up for, was how like it just ingrained in my brain, like I have to have a platform. Like I have to be important. I have to prove these people wrong.
Right.
And to be fair, like I would say 2021, I remember there was people from that school DMing me. They're like, I'm so proud of you, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, you made my life a living hell. But they are the reason I created a platform because, again, I just wanted to prove people wrong.
Right.
Which was not necessarily healthy within itself. Like, depends on how you perceive it. But when I started responding differently is really when I learned how to, well, at least how I responded differently to online hate was when I learned about boundaries. And I was like, sometimes you just cannot read the comments. Sometimes you gotta hire someone to delete them or you gotta hire someone to press block because it was getting really, really bad. And I feel like this is like, getting into the trenches. But in 2021 and like early 2022, like before my dad had passed and like after my dad had passed, it was just too much for me to be getting DMs all the time of people they hate me. Like there's some people that really hate me. And the only way I knew how to cope was to drink. So it's like drinking, blacking out, drinking all the time. And I had to learn, like, this is not healthy for me. Like, the only option is to just not see it. Like, I cannot see that.
Right.
That's not going to help me grow. It's not sustainable. So I had to set boundaries, very firm boundaries.
Where did you learn it from? Was it, like, maybe people in your family? And you, like, if you want to cut anything out.
I actually learned my current therapist is a trauma-informed therapist. And thankfully, she told me that she had a friend who, I don't know if they had a platform or like basically they went through something where they ended up getting a lot of hate. And she referred me to an Instagram account, Clementine Morgan. And Clementine posts a lot about like boundaries within the internet. And what she would just say is like, just block people. I was actually speaking to lawyers at that time too. And one of the lawyers told me, they referred me to ContraPoint's YouTube video.
Yeah.
I love ContraPoints. But the lawyer said that if people are hating on you, like you can block them. Like that is your home. Like that's your space.
Yeah.
So people are not like, if you don't want them to be welcome in your space, then kick them out.
Yeah.
And I kind of helped me reframe what my platform is. Like it's not everyone else's home. Like, this is my safe space that I can only keep a safe space by having healthy boundaries. And part of that is like, if you're not going to respect me, then you cannot stay in my home. Like, if you're not going to take your shoes off, don't come in here. Don't try to put your shoes on my bed. I mean, I guess this is different. This is different.
We're in a different space for sure. No, that is so like aspirational. Honestly, like, I learned from you from a lot of ways that I respond to hate, because I used to be a person where it's like so catty with people online. I'd just be like very, in a way, like, though I let the hate propel me to greatness and to proving people wrong, it was also kind of overtaking everything that was positive for me. Like, all I would think about was negative things. How can I respond? How can I prove people wrong? How can I educate? You know, at the end of the day, like, activism is you trying to change people's minds and make a difference. So you kind of have to go through changing people's minds and, you know, making them rethink everything and do some unlearning from what they thought a trans person was, or what they thought a Black person was, or whatever like minority group you're in, like, just to remove stereotypes from kind of like a lens that people have onto you.
Two things with that is, like, one, I mean, people love you, but I feel like you genuinely do not receive enough credit for how revolutionary you are. Like, I say this all the time, but for real, I think like in less than a decade, we're going to be seeing you in school history books.
Bye.
I feel like you are revolutionizing the queer space. And I do think that your voice is really, really important. I don't feel like we've seen a trans person like you in the media, and like just the way that you move about the world is just so brilliant. Like, you really know what you're doing.
Yeah.
For real.
I appreciate it.
Of course.
Just when I hear those things, it's so validating, because that's like literally what I aspire to do every single day, is to make change and help people, in a sense, just realize that it's okay to be themselves and it's okay to be different. And, you know, it's hard, but hearing that is very
of course. You know, nobody deserves to feel alone, and I feel like when you're made to feel that way, I don't like thinking in such a black and white way, but I do think of like Disney, like heroes and villains. A lot of the times the villains and the heroes are like going through the same exact thing, but some people choose to take it and become so powerful and like such an agent for change. And then, you know, sometimes people don't, and it becomes harder, and like you become self-consumed. But the way that you've chosen to take what you've experienced and say, like, I don't want other people to have to experience this. Like, I'm gonna be an agent for change is so important. Like, you know, I feel the same way. Like, that's a lot of it's not what I started off as. So that's why I say, like, I started off because I wanted validation. I felt alone. So then my platform became, not even intentionally, people commenting like, I'm a boy who collects dolls, like, you've inspired me, and like, I've showed my grandma your reviews and now she's letting me buy dolls. Like, seeing comments like that became like, okay, now this is a big part of my platform. Like, I have a platform, and I think it's important to advocate for the fact that, you know, a lot of the things that we're advocating for are, one, not hurtful to anybody, not hurtful, and a lot of the times just have to do with existing. Just wanting equal rights. Like, absolutely. Not that difficult of a concept.
Have you ever been canceled before? And I know you were talking about, you're like, maybe once or twice. I've definitely been canceled before. And like, you were talking about how that's all you could focus on was hate comments. And in a sense, when you are being canceled, that's all in your comments. So how did you go about like handling that, and like what was the experience for you?
I guess I'll start by saying that it's difficult, because I think even if I'm perceiving it as a hate comment, like, because it's triggering for me in some way, not every hate comment is a hate comment. And I think when people experience some type of cancellation, it's oftentimes people trying to be agents for change without realizing that this is not a sustainable or healthy way of going about creating change, because there is just literal proof. If people want to look it up, her name is Dr. Christine Marie, and she did a whole dissertation on media misrepresentation and how important it is for human beings to be able to tell their own narrative. So when people experience cancellation or like public humiliation of any way, because that's really what canceling is meant to do. Like, it's public shaming and humiliation in hopes of changing a person in power, so that way, you know, they're being held accountable, or that way that they are being, you know, changed in some way, that they're representing a certain community in like a healthy way, and that they're like an ideal citizen. But what the dissertation explains is that what happens when you're receiving that level of criticism or hatred or what have you, a lot of people tend to develop PTSD symptoms. And you can't be an agent for change if you're like a martyr or, you're not able to emotionally regulate. So I think that's the first part of it. Yes, I've been canceled numerous times. I don't even know if I have the emotional regulation to go into the details of all of it. And I think in lieu of us saying like, we don't want to be misinformed or say things on the internet that are wrong. So that's why I like pause and I really have to think about what I'm saying because I do not want to say something out of a trauma response. But I think what's happened is I've felt so dehumanized and so humiliated that it affects my everyday life. Like I feel more alone than I probably ever have. I feel incapable of making change, but yet I still continue to try to do it. And I think there's a large portion of the social media community that I think needs a voice that is like so terrified of being canceled or like being on the other end of that. That is why I talk about how like I do think there's a difference between being ignorant and being intolerable. And I don't think I'm like a bigoted person. Like I would not be going around just saying slurs.
Exactly.
Definitely not now.
No.
And I definitely would never do something intentionally that would cause harm to others. Now, with that being said, I am a firm believer that like when you're apologizing, your intention does not matter. You do not need to say like, oh, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings or like, I'm sorry if this offended anybody. My belief around that is like, don't be sorry you offended anybody because other people's feelings are not something to be sorry for or to pity. Second thing is I think part of being accountable in an apology is about saying like acknowledging you made a mistake and how are you going to change it and how are you going to move forward. And for me, I think what I've tried to represent like through my own platform is continuing to try to be an agent for change, continuing to try to represent things and just do the best that I can to be as best a role model as I can, which includes not responding the way that I used to things. Yeah. It includes being a representation of healthy boundaries, but canceling is a big topic. We could go on for hours about that.
Right. No, and I think for sure, like the way you've handled it is amazing. I am somebody who has also been canceled many of times. A lot of it's just like misunderstandings or like me growing up in front of the camera and learning with the world. In a sense, you kind of just have everything documented. So it kind of puts you up for critique no matter what, because
it's intense.
You literally are learning.
There was a post that Clementine shared recently that it kind of like changed my thought process around things that said that essentially there's a lot of scapegoating going on, that like other people, like we're not billionaires, and this could become again a whole political topic, but we're not billionaires. Like we're not out here with like obscene amounts of powers. We are still marginalized people that like if we get canceled from our groups, where do we turn to? Like I can't go to the church. Like I'm still going to be who I am. Like I'm still a queer individual, and I still have very niche interests. So like I rely on my marginalized group for support and community.
Yeah.
So I think the misconception about like canceling people like us, and not to say again that like, we can't be accountable or like change or make mistakes, but I think the difference is that like we're not like Trump. Like we're not billionaires where like if you are calling us out for something that we have so much power that like we can just get away with things. Like if it's over for us, like it's over. Yeah. We don't really have anywhere else to go. So I do think that there's a lot of scapegoating going on where people who have that much power, we're like turning against each other. Like, there was like a funny joke someone made and I'm trying to think of it, but like it was something about like eating the rich, but then we're just like eating ourselves. Like what happens after we've eaten all the rich? Like you start eating each other. And I feel like we've skipped the part of like eating the rich and we're just eating ourselves, and we need to have solidarity, especially in our marginalized groups. Like I still love my community. I love the queer community. I love the doll community. The agent of change I want to create is solidarity and like being together and less loneliness. Yeah. And a safe space to change and grow.
That's so beautiful. I love it all.
Thanks. Thanks. Let's put it on a note card.
Yeah.
Let me go do something to get canceled real quick.
No! I don't want to go through that again.
No. But
this time I can be there.
Right.
Because you said you're feeling alone, and I'm just like, I don't know. A lot of the times also, like, you feel very isolated because even the people in your workspace are turning on you because because they're worried about their reputation. So not only will they throw all their morals out the door of like friendship and, you know, standing with you because what people are saying online is so loud.
Yeah.
But they're also, in a sense, like becoming those people who are also hating. So it kind of just becomes so loud to the point where you're like, how do I even deal with this if the only people I can go to is my family because they're forced to be there for me?
And it's difficult to, like, there's layers where like family doesn't always get it, where they're kind of like, just ignore the hate comments.
Yeah.
But that definitely just, it doesn't, I don't feel like that works. Like, it depends on what you mean by ignore. If you mean ignore by like, again, pay someone else to delete and block, sure, because then you're never seeing it. But if you're reading it, you logically cannot ignore once you've consumed it. Like, once you've seen it, you can't just block it out your brain.
Yeah.
Secondly, I am also guilty, especially before getting canceled, of like being afraid of associating with canceled people, because I'm like, I don't want to be part of it. Like, I don't want to end up losing my reputation. Like, I need to make sure I stay in good status with my community.
Yeah.
And then once you experience it, you're like, wow, that was an asshole thing of me to do as a friend. Like, stand by your friends.
Exactly.
But I mean, I understand the anxiety. And I think that, again, is, I speak to the importance of solidarity and like being able to speak out against like what's really happening here and like, why do we cancel people? That's the conversation I want to be having, because I think that there's a lot of validation in it, because I remember canceling people and calling people out because you get so many likes for it. People love it. They want to see you drag and read, and it feels okay because it feels like you are taking down the villain.
Right.
But I think it was Betty Friedan or like somebody in during second wave feminism that said that actually probably wasn't Betty Friedan then, but somebody who said that the snowflake doesn't have to be responsible for the avalanche. So when you're making one story post, dragging someone, you're not on the receiving end of like reading hundreds of story posts, dragging and reading you and like calling you out, where then it feels incredibly overwhelming. Like, you drown in the avalanche.
Right.
I do want to take a minute to say that in lieu of speaking about trauma and emotional dysregulation, in order to truly be accountable, I think it takes time. Like, you have to take time to really process what people are telling you that you did wrong and what mistakes you've made to be able to even change.
Yeah.
To come right out immediately, I think if we're to look at it from a marketing stance, sure, marketing wise, it might be smart to come out and say something. But us being real human beings, which I would rather advocate versus marketing, is
we need to process it.
We need to take a minute to think, like, what are people saying? So I do think, like you were saying, like, sometimes things are being said, even if you're not being canceled or like you see something else happen, you feel like I have to speak now. The world ain't going anywhere, not in our timeline. So I think that we can take a minute to, you know, decompress, really process what people are saying, and then address things again in a mature and truly accountable way. Because when you can't force people into accountability, especially as someone who's been in some toxic relationships. You tell your ex to go to therapy, they're not just going to go do it. They're not going to just go do it. And if they go do it, like, you can bring the horse to water, but you cannot make them drink. So again, they have to want to change. Like, people have to want to change and account for their mistakes. And I think that happens by having the space and time and support to do that, to feel safe enough. Like, if I do change, like, am I going to be accepted, or am I going to be told that, like, this is a bullshit apology? Absolutely. I think there's a lot of fear around that.
And you keep on saying in lieu of that.
In the lieu.
What does lieu mean?
You know, I've been spelling it wrong this whole time. I thought it was L-O-U. That's like the name. It's L-I-E-U. I think it's French or something.
In lieu of that.
In lieu. It's like we just had a baguette or something.
In lieu of that, we have my supporters asking questions about online bullying. So I want to give them the platform to, in a sense, hear from us and see what they're saying. A lot of them are statements, I will say. So just give me your opinion on what they're saying.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, because I originally said questions or hot takes on online bullying, and like every single one was mostly a hot take, which I think kind of goes to show that like online bullying is not just for like people who are influencers and creators. I feel like it's like bleeding into our normal everyday lives, you know, as people who are just everyday people, you know?
I think of like just kids on Instagram. I'm sure they're getting bullied in school. Or, like,
absolutely.
being completely manipulated. And I just feel so
Well, because like
those people.
the people who were too afraid to say things to me in person at school would say it online. And then when I didn't have classes with them, it's like, oh, that was the only place where you had to confront me.
Stephanie Germanotta, you will never be famous.
So yeah, I definitely think it's like very prevalent with everybody in the world, not just people who are public figures.
Yes.
People are too comfortable hiding behind a screen. What do you think about that?
I guess like I kind of understand. I don't necessarily know what it's like to hide behind a screen because anytime I've been hateful on the internet, it was public because I'm stupid. But I do think that people who are hiding behind a screen, like, again, I just think emotional dysregulated. When I hear somebody's like that, I'm like, get some therapy.
Right.
You'll be fine. Get
Everything
some therapy,
that like people have said to me on screen also is just like not matched up with the actions that they have said they were going to do or call me, you know, like it's just always cowardly. It's always like all talk, no walk.
Yes,
which I'm not here to get like threatened and here to get like hate crime.
You know, this might be too much drama, but I do sometimes, I'm like, do I secretly know this person? Is this person on a fake account because I know them and they're too afraid to say it with their chest? But I'm a big firm believer in say it with your chest.
Yeah.
If you're not going to, again, if you can't say it immediately, just be like, I got to take some time to respond. But if you're going to say it with your chest.
I agree. How do you spot the difference between people bullying and joking, which I think is so prevalent right now, but just because like the culture of comments right now is just so belittling and
everybody thinks they're your friend. We're not in the workroom. Like, stop. You're not on Drag Race.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine how much vulnerability I'm giving to others and for me to understand why they feel very, very close to me, which I think is a good thing to feel because for some people, I'm like the only trans person they know and feel like they can identify with. But also that's a lot of pressure. I feel like with that pressure, people need to understand that we are just people.
Yeah.
And we can't give out so much vulnerability to the point where we're stretching ourselves thin.
No, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
But, you know, sometimes jokes are funny. I will say that.
Yeah.
Like somebody came into one of my auctions and they trolled it by like buying up a ton of stuff. And what I've kind of learned through watching Drag Race and like other drag queens is sometimes if somebody makes a joke at you, make a joke back.
Right.
Like sometimes it's not that serious. Life is not that serious. Just have a good time.
I think I've learned that especially with my friends because as we were growing up and as we were pretty new into our transitions, we were being mean to each other because we were all insecure.
Yeah, you know, you make those condescending passive-aggressive comments and it hurts. Like it does really hurt. And I just think I've gotten to a point now where maybe I'm just so dissociative and like emotionally numb myself. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna make a comment back. But not on TikTok. You'll never see me respond to somebody on TikTok snotty or like anything like that. Like I just don't come back. No.
Yeah. And I used to, but I feel like at this point it's just not worth it. And sadly we have a lot to lose when it comes to how we behave. So it's kind of like you can't be rude and snobby even you wanted to.
I say that for my mom.
Also very isolating.
No, it definitely is.
Because I want to respond how I want to respond. I want to make sure that not only am I being authentic to what I'm putting out in the world, but if I'm going to get a hate comment, I want to be authentic.
We should go to a rage room. We should.
Because
you can't let it out on the people on the internet, so we might as well go to a rage room, break some things.
I just feel like sometimes though, like you expect me to be so authentic and share everything with the world, but you don't like it when I'm here to respond to you when you have something negative to say about me.
It's such a double-edged sword. Like, but I love the tweet. There was a tweet that was like, me after I finally respond after years of like people criticizing me. And it's like, well, sorry, I guess I'm such a bitch for sticking up for myself.
Right.
But I just thought it was so funny. I was like, that's so true.
But it's true, you know?
Sometimes you got to just take the villain at it.
That part. No, I've been comfortable with sitting back and being the villain, honestly, because
you're not. Like, you're literally not.
Exactly. Like, I just know that it's like a false representation of what I am and what I put out in the world.
So powerful.
And, you know, like, in a sense, if people are going to think that about me, I know what I am. I know what I'm sticking for. So a narrative that's about me online is out of my control.
You know, I say that's so powerful, and not even in like a patronizing way, but because I do think when you experience so much of that, it's very hard to not lose yourself. There are times where I'm like, am I just actually a really bad person and I just don't realize it?
No, and to be fully transparent, like I've been through being in my bedroom, reading those comments, reading being canceled, considering, am I actually being a bad person for what I'm doing? You know, like I would sit there, cry, reevaluate everything that I would say. And I'd have to lean on my friends to kind of like put me back in check. Like, no, this is what you meant, V. And this is what people are like twisting your words. And I had to learn to continue to stick to my word. So I didn't look like I was fumbling in front of a bunch of people.
It's hard. You're juggling a lot. You are.
But, you know, as hard as it is, it's like prepared me for so much. And I feel like it makes me such a strong person. And it makes me understand like relationships, friendships on another level where I can be the mature person if somebody's being rude to me. And
which you have. I will say the times that I've seen it, you can be very like, you don't have to like address everything.
Right.
You can be very business, and when you put your business hat on, you're not
exactly.
You know, you don't have time to come with the comebacks. Me on the other hand, sometimes I'm like, you better check yourself. Like I'm like, you better cut it out. But you know.
No,
I do think it's important to be mature.
Yeah, I can't deny with my friends I will be a little immature, but it's always to the point where it's like
those are always such good memories.
You know, I feel like I'm never going to say anything to you that isn't true.
Right. Even if it's just true in the moment.
Exactly.
If it's just true to me, it's absolutely true.
Like, if you're being rude, you're being rude. I'm going to call you out on it. And
maybe one day we'll get to a place on the internet where humanity's like just more emotionally evolved, and I could just be like, you're being rude.
No,
like,
literally.
You know, I didn't even think
in a
about
sense,
that.
I do that when I'm educating people because not to make people feel insecure back, but like you're poking at me because you have insecurities and because you're not happy with myself and because I am. And so I have to remind you, you know, I'm just here being proud of myself and being in my authentic skin while you're critiquing that. You, in a sense, cannot ever feel that until you understand that you hate yourself.
Yeah. You know,
so
get a therapist.
Right.
BetterHelp exists.
You know, it's surprising. I don't have a therapist and I really wish I did.
That's what this is right now. But to be real, it's just a live, laugh, love time. Like it's just fun to be in therapy, and you know, it's not always fun because you're being emotionally drained, but you just learn so much. I'll end off with this is like the best way to approach therapy is treating it like school. Yeah. Treat it like you're taking a class. You're there to learn about like techniques about emotional regulation. You're there to learn about yourself. And I know a lot of people are gonna be like, I already know myself, blah, 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 blah. But like, let's be real. I'm sure everyone can think of a time where they look back and they're like, I didn't even think I was coming off that way, or like, I didn't realize I was behaving that way. Yeah. And a therapist there is just kind of be like, well, you are being this way, and they're being paid to do it. So it's not like a friend. There's no emotional attachment where you feel like you're being condescending. There's no jealousy. And it's, again, treat it like school. Treat it like you're learning something, not like a doctor, because a therapist is not a doctor. Big misconception.
Well, I think that'll wrap us up for today's episode. Do you have anything that is coming up for you that you want to do a little shameless plug for, or any social platforms that you want to also share?
Aside from Oklahoma, I am doing. So I'm gonna be selling these hands that I made. I got a 3D printer and I made custom hands that I'm calling Clawdeena's claws on my whatnot.
Way.
Yeah, so people can get little customized hands. They are like, you know, I think legally it's fine, but it's a small batch. It's bespoke art, and it's inspired by Monster High. Oh, okay. For legal reasons. It's inspired. It might fit in the doll's hands.
Oh, okay, I was like, can you like click it onto their hands? Yeah. Okay, for sure. Okay,
they're just my own like hand poses.
What are these hands?
Because, you know, there's a lot of like dolls that have come out, but like I love doll photography, and we need more poses. Like, so I did like different poses that you could do, like a heart hand. There's like a middle finger, and there's like no, I didn't do rock out because they already had that. But whatever they haven't made, I was like, you know what?
Cute. I'm gonna have to purchase.
Yeah, they're only gonna be like $5, so it's cheap.
Period. And for me, I guess my social media platforms are Beyondre Mitchell on Instagram, Beyondre on TikTok, Beyondre M on Snapchat, and Beyondre Mitchell on YouTube and Twitter. If you want to watch this live and in person, all the visuals, you can watch this on the Past Your Bedtime YouTube channel, and don't forget to subscribe. It really helps keep the safe space for queer people of color like myself. But that'll end us for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening again. again. I love you, dollies. Bye.